Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where we discover the communities that are making a difference in the lives of others. Our self-discovery is something we are all making on our life's journey. Here you will find the people that will be your guidance, that will be your inspiration, that will be there for you in support on your journey of life. Do enjoy. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of An Author's Kiss right here in selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is Jeffrey Stevens. We're going to be talking about his new novel. It's called The Fool's Errand. It's about a patriotic heart into the Mafia-Thriller tale. Years after the death of his gangster's father, a young man discovers a letter that sends him reluctantly defying the mob as he races to locate the hidden treasure. It's been 6 years since the ultimate death of Blackie, a charming rogue who endlessly pursued the big deal. And when his son discovers an enigmatic letter telling him of a cache of stolen money, feeling no choice but to pursue his father's dream, he embarks on a search that leads him from New York to the Strip in Las Vegas and ultimately to the south of France. Along his life-altering journey, he's confronted by the dangers of his father's past as he unravels decades-old mystery while revealing the long-buried secrets as well. So Jeffrey is born in New York City, graduated from Bronx High School, and he's completed his BA in creative writing from Pennsylvania. His first novel he wrote in 1970, which would not be published for several years as they entered Fordham University School of Law. He practiced legal practice, including extensive civil and criminal courtroom experience, and he has represented a wide range of celebrity clients. And we're going to be diving into this fool's errand, but also the joy of writing. If it takes a particular, everybody thinks they can be an author until they start writing, and then they realize it's not as easy as they think. But we all need a really good kind of mystery and discovery and kind of danger and hope and everything. You know, that's what these kind of books do, isn't it? It takes us on a journey. It shows us exactly what we would love to kind of experience ourselves, and as the dangers that they go through and the discoveries that they make, and are they going to get it before the bad guy does? It really does excite us and intrigue us, doesn't it, Jeffrey?
It certainly does me.
Yeah, yes. I'm a whodunit fan. You know, I love things that kind of unravel and who did it or did they find it. I love things that take you on a journey. And I think whenever I put a book down that's taken me on that journey, it's always a pause to reflect of, that may have been a thriller or a fictional story, but my God, do I relate to it on so many levels?
It's interesting you say journey because, I've written obviously books before this, and I have out a spy thriller series. I've got 4 of those, and I did a murder mystery. But during the pandemic, I felt like I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted it to be a little closer to home in the sense of family orientation, because so many of us either were locked up with our family,
Yes.
which is sometimes good or bad, or we couldn't get to see our family and so on. But what I also wanted to do is I also wanted it to be a little bit of a whirlwind around the world type thing, because we're all locked up so much that I like the idea of going from New York, as you say, over to Vegas, then down to Monaco, the south of France, and Paris, and all of that. I thought that would be a fun thing to do, especially this time with everyone, stuck in front of their TV sets and so on. So anyway, so that's was one of the motivations in this particular book, which is a one-off and not typical of what I've written so far.
I mean, it's fun. I mean, I've actually interviewed real life gangsters, and what made them gangsters, what path they went down there. And, everybody thinks that they're just going to grow up and become a gangster, or they become it because of the environment that they're in, the circumstances that somebody becomes a gangster. And of course, family is born to it. There is no choice. They're always on alert. They're always going to be victimized. Somebody wanting to snatch them or take them out, big retaliation. I mean, it's a precarious job to be a child of a gangster, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I've known gangsters and I've represented gangsters, by the way, back in my day when I was an attorney in New York City. So, yes, I agree. And being the son of a gangster, as we have in Fool's Errand, where our narrator and our main character is a straight shooter. His mother was intent on him never following his father's path, and he did not. And so when he finds this letter, and this is no spoiler alert for potential readers out there, because this all is disclosed on the first page, that he discovers this letter 6 years after the early demise of his dad. So this is almost like his father talking to him now from the great beyond. And as you correctly pointed out, his father was somebody who was always reaching for the brass ring and never quite got hold of it. And now he tells his son this story about hidden money, and that he can't give the son too many details in case the wrong people get their hands on the letter. And now the son has to make a decision. Do I put this letter back in the envelope, or do I go on this crazy treasure hunt? And since the name of the book is Fool's Errand, we know what he does.
Yes.
So as you say, he encounters danger, intrigue, romance, family secrets, and so forth and so on. And I really do feel it's a fun read. It is a father-son story, but it's a great kind of international treasure hunt, as I say. And the reviews, thankfully, and I appreciate everyone saying how great the book is and how much they enjoyed it and how much it caused them to think of their own family during it and even after. I had one wonderful woman who's also a writer, Nancy Christie. She reviewed it, and she said that the first thing she did when she finished the book was she hung up and called her mother. so it's sort of like that connection, is a lot of what the book is about, but it's wrapped around a fun time.
As I said, when I read a book or even watch a good movie, if it's caused me pause for thought afterwards, where I feel, what would I do in that situation? Oh gosh, I feel that, or oh God, why did they do that? I think that's always the compliment to the author or to the show, because anything that makes you stop and think and reflect, on your own life, or even on a different form of perception. Yes, there's certain things we watch or read because it's exciting at the moment. Oh, that was a good book, put it down and on you go with your life. But when you've got something that you can refer back to, or something that keeps popping back into your mind, that really is kind of the hook that an author really wants, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It certainly is for me. Look, I understand there are some books that are just straight entertainment fiction. Yep. And you read them. I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and I'm not knocking any writer, and I'm not going to use names, but my friend was saying that 3 different times he has picked up the same book by the same writer because he had forgotten that he read it, and he was 50 pages in, and he said, wait a minute, I've read this one before, because that's what they're intended to be. They're intended to be entertainment for the moment and so on.
Yeah.
When I write, I try and create characters of real flesh and blood. I want people to relate to those characters, because I think there's value in that. I think there's value in us seeing that there are other people who suffer the same woes, who share the same experiences, who have the same attitudes, whatever. And I like to think that at the end of a book, that a reader is going to think back and say, gee, that Blackie was an interesting character, or that scene had certain meaning to me. So, and that's important. I'll tell you a funny story. You said you want to talk a bit about, the writing process and people wanting to write books. I've written a number of books. I have several that are not yet published, and I'm hoping they will be. Some I hope will never be.
They're written just for you.
When you said I wrote a book back in 1970, I wanted to cringe. But anyway, that book will never see the light of day. I promise you, Sarah.
But it was the catalyst, right? It was all served its purpose.
Yeah, but I have this friend of mine who's a writer, and I'll give him a plug. His name is Chris Beakey. He writes some very edgy mysteries, if you like mysteries. And Chris is terrific, and we read each other's work and we give each other encouragement. And so one of the things about Fool's Errand was there were a lot of scenes in there that were very personal, and some of which were drawn or at least based on sort of kind of things that happened in my life. And so the book wound up being a pretty long book, and it just didn't flow correctly. It just didn't flow. And one day he called me up and he said, listen, I have to tell you something. I know you're going to be upset. He said, but this scene, and that scene all have to go. He said, I love them all. Save them for another book, but they've got to go.
Mm.
And I knew he was right, and it improved the pacing of the book and made it a much quicker read, because at some point during the book, as you know, you're in the midst of this treasure hunt. You don't want to, in the beginning, it's okay for the narrator to be giving you background and a sense of his family, but you don't want to stop in the middle of the action and say, let me tell you this story about my sister, and let me tell you this story about my mother. That doesn't
In the
help.
middle of a
It doesn't,
shootout.
it doesn't help the pacing.
No.
But one of the highest compliments he could possibly have paid me is, there's a scene towards the end of the book, and I said, well, what, you don't think I should take out that scene? And there was a pause on the phone, and Chris said, if you take that scene out, I'll kill you. Because he just loved it so much. He said, I cry every time I read it because it's so great. It hits so close to home. I said, okay, that stays in. But anyway, we cut this book from 95,000 words to 75,000 words, which is a lot of cutting.
Yes.
So it's a really manageable size now. And it just, I'm hoping that people see it as a page turner, but a page turner that leaves them with things to think about in their own lives, and so on and so on. If I could jump in again about the writing process too, people say something, they ask me sometimes, where do you come up with these ideas and whatever? So we're having one of those conversations. We all have them at some point in life.
Mm-hmm.
If you could spend one day with someone who's gone, who would that be? Mm-hmm. And some people say, Jesus Christ. Some people say Isaac Newton. Some people say Leonardo da Vinci. But who do most people say? They say, if I could spend one more day with my mom, who's now gone, if I could spend one more day with my dad. So it got me to thinking, and I decided, wouldn't it be interesting if I have a young man who finds a letter from his father who had died 6 years earlier? It's sort of like the father speaking to him from the great beyond. And he knows he's never going to have this opportunity again. This is a one-off where, this letter, and he's only going to get to open it once. He's only going to get to read it once, and so on. And I thought, that's terrific. Just one little problem. I need a story to go with it.
Yes.
What does the letter say, right? So, it's got to say something important. And so I built this whole novel around the idea that he gets this letter, and that letter puts everything into motion and creates the whole dynamic of the story. But it just started with that little idea.
Yes.
So go figure, right?
My brother is an author. I'll give him a plug out, Sam Hawksmoor. And he writes thriller, but he writes a lot of youth genre, and he writes a lot of multi-dimensional stuff. There've virtually been no book of his that I haven't put down, not only enjoyed, but also thought, like, what if? What if it had gone that way? What if this had happened? You wrote a book, Thomas D, Repercussions of Thomas D, a young boy on his phone with his girlfriend, teenager, and all of a sudden goes through a wormhole and finds him in 1945 in the war. What's this device you have? Are you a spy? Ends up telling everybody everything about it.
Say the name of the book again.
Repercussions of Thomas D by Sam Hawksmoor. And it changes history completely. Where the Germans win, and it's just like, it makes us pause and think in our own lives, is that what actions do we take mindlessly that we don't know the ripple effect or the domino effect that it has? And I love, as I said, even if it's just simply a fun novel, and as I said, I love the mystery, I love the the adventures. It takes you somewhere. Not only is it stimulating and exciting, but I love the food for thought. Could I do that in my position? Would I have done that? God, I wish they hadn't done that. You become kind of one of the characters in the book or the show, don't you? Because you're the cheerleader on the side. And my mom was an actress, and apparently there was one play she was doing, and she had to choose between her husband and the poet, and I was apparently 6 or 7 in the audience, and I go with the poet. I got really immersed. The poet seemed nicer, but we want that interaction from people. We want them to feel like they're part of that story, that they're on that adventure with somebody.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, I agree. And that is why I think, this is just my theory, but you're right in tune with me. I think the reason that mysteries remain such a popular genre, in fact, I'm being told by my editor and others in the publishing industry that mysteries are the hottest form right now. We've gotten a little bit away from these espionage thrillers and we're back to mysteries. The reason is that we do ride along with the characters because the whole sense of the whodunit is, can we figure it out?
Yes.
The murder mystery that came out before this book, before Fool's Errand, was called Crimes and Passion. And the highest praise in a murder mystery that I could get is when someone writes me and says, I didn't know till the last page.
Mm.
Because it's, because I hate when someone says, I knew this halfway through, that kind of thing. Or when Agatha Christie wrote, what was the name of it? The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Do you remember that? I think it might have even been her first murder mystery. And it turns out at the end of the book, and I'm sorry for those of you who haven't read it, but if you haven't read it by now, it's been 100 years. At the end of the book, you discover that the narrator was the murderer. And so he was one of the first unreliable narrators in fiction, because he tells you the whole story, and at the end you learn he was the murderer. And you never would have guessed it the way the book is written. I mean, even if you know that, you go back and read it and enjoy it.
Yes.
But the other thing, too, is that there are certain books, and I know you must feel the same way. There are certain books where you become so attached to the character that you're really sorry when the book is over. Mm-hmm. And I want to name 2 books of that type that resonate for me. One is an old book. One of my favorite, it's called The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham. And the main character, Larry Durrell, goes on a whole spiritual journey. That's what the book is about, which I know you're interested in. Mm-hmm. And it is just such a wonderful book. And at the end, when he goes off, you think, oh, come on, Mom, you could have written a sequel.
Yes, exactly.
And the other book, much more recently, I don't know if you read it. It got a lot of play, and I guess it sold really well. And somebody told me about it, and I said, how could this book be any good, when they told me the premise? And it's called A Gentleman in Moscow. And A Gentleman in Moscow, the entire story, I'm not ruining anything, unlike Roger Ackroyd. The Gentleman in Moscow is about the Russian Revolution, where an aristocrat who believes in his country comes back from Paris at the very start of the book, even though he's an aristocrat and will be in trouble. And because he came back on his own, they couldn't murder him. They couldn't assassinate him. So they banish him to live the rest of his life in a hotel in Moscow, the Metropole Hotel. And you think, like, God, that's so claustrophobic. I mean, the writing is so fantastic. The character is so great that when the book ends, you feel like you've lost a great friend. And to me, that's terrific writing. If I can relate to a character like that, where I'm sorry at the end that I'm not going to get to see him anymore, that touches me. And I'm hoping that in Fool's Errand, there are a couple of characters you feel that way about.
Yeah, I mean, that we want that attachment. Again, with my brother, he wrote this trilogy that it starts off being one thing, people finding various gifts of teleportation, etc. But by the 3rd book, what you discover, what it's really about, is astounding. Absolutely astounding, because never would you have thought of that. But all along the line, you just think, oh, this, oh, that, and that, and that. And then at the end, it's like, oh my God, and it's,
that's fantastic.
Because it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It keeps you guessing. It keeps you immersed in the characters. And when I have a good book like that, you better give me a sequel. I want to know the next chapter.
I know, it's true. It's true. People enjoyed Crimes and Passion, and so I have written a sequel to that. Fool's Errand, I haven't done anything about yet. But as of yet. But yes, it's so great when you relate to the characters. And so in a murder mystery, if there's a detective or a character that you really like, and you're engaged in the what's going on and trying to figure it out along with them, that's the other thing about murder mysteries. We have the typical murder mystery, which is a murder's committed on the first page, let's say, and in comes Sarah, and she's the detective. And now you ride along with her as she figures it out, right? That's typical. Then you have the other version in the genre, which is Columbo, which is, we know exactly who committed the murder. Mm-hmm. And now the game and the fun is working with Columbo to see how he's going to trap the murderer into exposing themselves and giving themselves up or admitting the crime or whatever. And, I love Columbo. He was a great character, Peter Falk. It was terrific. But I like the classic murder mystery where I don't know what happens. Yeah. And it sort of goes along like that. So anyway, it's a matter of taste.
And also that it's not always just a straight kind of murder mystery.
That's right.
Talking about, because my brother writes these things, and he's just written one. We feel your pain, so you don't have to. And it's like, okay, what's that about? And it's about a guru who can take pain away, but it means somebody else has got to have it. And so it uncovers, kind of conspiracy and just a whole pile of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that when a thriller can take you down, oh gosh, it isn't taking you away from the story. It's taking you off in a direction that makes you more engaged with the story, because it's
Yes.
revealing things that you look at and you go, because so many people kind of maybe write a thriller linear. We don't want linear. We want the
No.
twists
You
and
don't want
turns.
linear.
I remember him in one of his books once writing himself into a pit, and it took him a week to write himself out of that pit. And I know
We've all
that's
done
why,
that.
right? You know what it's like with a writer. You get so caught up with
Yeah.
something, and then basically you kind of come to a stop. It's like, okay, well, I got myself into this. How the hell do I get myself out of it?
Right. Exactly. No, exactly. That's right. Never paint yourself into the pit. Always, always leave yourself that opening when you get up from the table. Come back the next day, at least you know where you're going to go. Yeah, so true.
Yes. Yeah, well, it took him a week to write himself out of that one. But I think that's also something we don't realize with authors. So many people are now, writing books, and a lot of self-help books and etc. And they all have their validity. But there is, there was another author I interviewed, and she was it a stenographer, in the court?
Uh-huh.
She was the artist. So she was the criminal artist in the courts. And she learned so much from doing, these crime arts over a number of years, that she actually created a story about a woman who did this, who then became a kind of a private eye unwillingly. And then it went into a series. But because she brought her expertise of what she knew into it, it took you down this journey, because we always take what we know in life and put that into the story, because
that makes the best writing.
Yeah, it does, because it's got that foundation and that validity, that structure, because you always need a structure in a book, don't you?
That's right. You can always recognize when someone's faking it.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're talking about. I mean, for example, I'm not going to write a book about the circus anytime soon because I don't know anything about it. But I do know about crime and about law and about espionage and things. Those are things I've been involved with, and that's what you should write. Yes, I totally agree.
And I know in the case of my brother, he's been writing all his life, and he researches, and he even goes and visits places if they're going to be in the scene.
Me too.
He will, read any historical things that need to be known. He wrote one on the pandemic back in 2000 something, which was about the SARS, and he researched all of that. And if you don't have that kind of truth in there, that connection in there, either historically or currently or something, some nitty facts, it becomes a little bit what I call kind of the Too Fast and the Furious. It's all about the action and isn't about the substance.
That's right. No, I totally agree.
Do you have a writing process? Are you kind of very disciplined? Is it this amount of time, or you do this or that?
I'm pretty disciplined. My MO is that when I'm working on a novel, which is not always, I take breaks in between and I do different things, and I write political commentary, I write nonfiction and things like that. When I'm writing a novel, I like to write at least 3 or 4 hours a day, and only in the morning. I'm useless by the afternoon. By the afternoon, I have to go do something else. But I like to do it in the morning early, when I'm fresh, when my mind is clear. And I used to write by longhand all the time and then transcribe it to the computer. But it's gotten to the point where, we're all so conversant on the computer that I write directly pretty much onto my computer now. And I know that people feel it's not the same thing. And they're right. It's not. You don't get the same. There's something about your hand, a fountain pen, a pad. There's something about that makes a connection that a computer does not. However, it's a lot easier to edit right away on a computer, or you say, oh my God, that was awful, and just take the whole paragraph out and then rewrite the paragraph. It's a lot easier to do it that way. So anyway, that's what I've done. But the other thing is I always, and people ask me this, I always work from an outline. I have tried the other process. I come up with a great idea. I come up with a great character, and I said, let's just run with this. It never runs. That's where people talk about writer's block. That's where it comes from, because with an outline, even if I'm having a bad day, I know that I could say, okay, today I'm going to write about my interview with Sarah. I know it's going to happen. And I know that, and I don't know maybe how the interview is going to go. Maybe you get up and start yelling at me. Maybe someone comes in and hits me in the back of the head while I'm talking. Who knows? But at least I know I'm having the interview with Sarah that day in the book. And working without an outline does not work for me. So that's just my advice. Other writers may operate differently, but I like an outline, not too detailed, because you like spontaneity, and like, you want to have a certain amount of leeway. Like we were talking the other day, someone asked, what do you start with in your book? Other than the main character, maybe the main kernel of an idea, I always start with the ending.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Yes.
You need to know how
where
you're going to pay the reader off at the end.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like if you and I said, we're going to take a drive from Vancouver to Florida, we say, okay, we pretty much know then we're going to arrive in Miami at some point. We don't know how long it's going to take, and we don't know how many stops we'll make along the way, but we need to know where we're going. Otherwise, we're just going to get in the car and go in circles. It makes no sense. You have to have some kind of a direction. And so I believe in the importance of the ending, because you want a reader to come away satisfied. There's nothing worse. And I've had the experience of reading a book, and when you get all the way to the end, you said, that's it? You've got to be kidding me.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've watched movies like that. I'm sure we all have. And you said, and it fades to black. And I said, that was the end of the movie?
It's limp.
Yeah, really. No sort of payoff, no satisfaction,
No.
no sense of what really happened, no denouement where you find out, at the end what happened to people and all that sort of thing. So for me, I have an outline. I know where I'm going to begin with. I know where I'm starting. And then I fill in a lot of things along the way.
Right. It's like when I do a speech, I have highlights. I'm very organic, but I have the highlights there that kind of keep me on track and keep me focused in there. And that's kind of really what you're doing, isn't it?
Excuse the phone, please. I don't know what. I'm sorry. I'm going to figure out a way to hang this up. Okay.
Somebody needs to get hold of you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Whatever it is, it'll have to wait. I apologize, everybody.
Don't worry.
It's the modern world. Things are always ringing.
Yes, exactly. We have to go with our flow. I'm dyslexic, so writing by hand, I couldn't even read my own writing. And then I would get frustrated that things are being written backwards. So when the computer came along and I started writing, that's actually when I got creative. So we all have a creative process, and it's knowing what it is. Some people like to write at night, some first in the morning, some have real structured discipline. It is that if you are really intending to write, is kind of, I think you have a dialogue with your characters beforehand.
Excuse me one second. I'm sorry, we'll get back on track. I remember reading years back, Joyce Carol Oates worked like 10 hours a day or something. She would write in the morning, then she would take a break. She'd teach or something wherever she was teaching in college. Then she would come back and do rewrites. I could never do that.
No.
I would be so useless the next day for writing. Right. And I hate to invoke a name like Hemingway, but I remember reading about Hemingway as a young man, and he said, make sure there's something in the well, so that you come back the next day and there's something there. Don't write the well dry, because if you come back and you've got nothing next day, those days start to string together. And I believe in that. I think you really have to, keep it going, but know when to stop and then come back the next day.
I mean, a lot of people even may go for a walk, may go do something, and all of a sudden the next part comes into it, or a character comes into it, and it's like, always have a pen ready to write down, because then that's somebody you're going to insert, because it's not like everything is creative the moment you start writing or at your computer. Is that when you're immersed into a book or storytelling, little characters are going to kind of pop in when you see somebody doing something, and you think, oh, that character will be good in the book. Do you find that?
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. And you have to be open to those things too. It's the other thing. I think it's sort of in the same line as this. You write a character, let's say whoever it is. I write the Sarah character, and she and Jeff are having a conversation, and then she lies to him about something, and I'll just sit there and I'll be so troubled, because I'll say, wait a minute, you built a character who is so honest and has such great integrity. If she lies, she wouldn't do that. So what happens is the Sarah character becomes life and blood to me, becomes real life. And so I know that your character is not going to lie. And so I have to rewrite the scene. And
right.
that's so important that characters within the
Mm.
universe of the book you've written, they have to be authentic
Yes.
within the book. You can't have somebody do something completely out of character because then it makes no sense.
But it also worries the reader.
That's right.
You know, you get stuck on that. Why did they do that? Why did that happen? And you
Well,
get,
and you could do that, by the way, you could do that for effect. Like
yes,
maybe
but not if it's, yeah,
it turned
not
out she wasn't so honest, and
right.
maybe that's what the
Yeah.
character's about. But
And
but
you
they
don't
have
want
to
it to
be.
keep you there and stop you from moving on. You
That's
don't
right.
want it to disturb you. You know, it can upset you if something, somebody dies along the way. But if you take a character so completely out of character,
That's right.
it's too much of a jolt and it disturbs people. And then they've lost the flow of reading. And it's like,
Totally.
well, I don't want
Which
to read this anymore.
No, which doesn't mean that characters cannot be three-dimensional. For
Right,
example,
exactly.
just to use Fool's example, Fool's Errand is an example. Blackie, who's the father, the deceased father of this young man, he did some bad things. He was on the fringes of crime and all this sort of thing, but he was three-dimensional. He also loved his son, and even though he was not the greatest father and made mistakes, in the end, he really did love his son, and so that gives him texture. It's
Yeah.
like villains. You don't want your villain to be 100% evil because then they're not interesting. They've got to have some other texture to them, to give them life. Otherwise, they're two-dimensional.
I mean, very often, we love to love the bad guy. We want to see some hope in that bad guy and not just pure evil. Oh, I don't care if they delete them. But you want to see somebody that's, had to face something. They kind of became bad or made bad decisions. And you're kind of rooting for them, that the hope that something will happen along the way, right?
Hannibal Lecter,
Yes,
Silence of the
exactly.
Lambs.
Yes,
I mean, he was the most gruesome, imaginable villain. He was a cannibal. He was a murderer. And yet he had a soft spot for Clarice.
yes,
And that little bit of humanity turned it around. The Godfather, Don Corleone, was a brutal and vicious murderer. He ran, as we were talking about criminals before, he ran an organized crime, family, and so forth. And yet, it's really a family story.
yeah,
He really cared about his son, Michael. He never wanted him to be in, quote, the family business, right? That was the whole point.
yes.
Michael was never meant to be in the business. It was going to be Sonny, not Michael. And so that gave him that humanity. Without that, he would have been a cardboard figure. But
Yeah,
instead, we rooted for him, and
right.
he was an awful person.
I know. I mean, and it kind of makes you question, how can I root for the awful person? And I think there's a sense there, that belief that we can all change under the right circumstances. And they say, a leopard never changes their spots. But I think, that if there is a willingness to see that something is not working and you're willing to change it, whether you succeed or not, people will root for you. Right? If you're trying to put a wrong right, people will root for you because you're feeding the right energy instead of the wrong energy. One of the things I don't like, I love a good thriller that undoes the mystery. And yes, there could be shootout scenes, but I hate it where it's gun first, and masses of bodies everywhere. Because
No, I agree.
where's the
I
intrigue
agree.
there? Give me, I mean, I was the fan of, obviously The Saint and Danger Man and the James Bond and everything. I loved the situations they would get in and have to get out. But now it seems
Sure.
to be everybody just shoots their way out. And it's like, where's the story there? I don't
Well,
mind a shootout scene, but not all the
more
time.
clever than that. You
Yeah,
want something more clever than that. I completely agree. Yeah, some of it is just, some of these body count movies. There's a series, and I shouldn't pick on anybody because I know people like this. And in fact, I'll admit I watched it. It's called John Wick with Keanu
yes,
Reeves.
yes.
The
And
body
I
count in
love,
those
piano.
movies
I know.
is, my son loves these things.
Yes,
I said, he must have killed 400 people in 2 hours.
yes.
It's like, and it's exciting and it's
Yeah.
cleverly plotted, but it just, I don't know. You want a little bit better than that, I think.
Yeah, I think more mind intrigue and some heart intrigue in there. We
Yep.
don't mind a villain, but and sometimes you're rooting for that villain. But if it's just carte blanche, it's where's the story in that? And
Yeah.
I also
No,
think
I
it
agree. I
glorifies
agree.
imbalance, and
And
it.
I was just going to say, in Fool's Errand, as an example, one of the things, as you know, is that this young man, he's chasing down this hidden treasure of money, whatever, that his father writes him about. And we know from the beginning, because who the father was, that this is stolen money. So it's not like he's a good guy. It's not like he's
Right.
trying to find, a lost necklace from his, that his mother lost one day. But yet we still root for him because we know what he's going through in order to embark on this journey. And so I think that's what makes things like that fun.
Yeah, it's I mean, this network is called self-discovery, and it's as people discover themselves in situations. I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead, and it's not anything to do with the zombies. It's to do with what people will do in order to survive. What will they do in circumstances? How do they change? Do they change to somebody they wish they never were? I'm intrigued with the psychology of people and what they will do, and because we have no idea, do we, until we're in a situation of how we would react. And that's why we're drawn to these type of books and movies, because it takes us down places that we know that we would probably never ever would go. And could we, how would we react in that situation? So we're
Right.
vicariously living through them, doing things we know that we will never do.
That's
We
right.
hope that we will never do.
Well, yeah, or if we were forced into situations, what would we do? As you said
Yeah.
earlier, the what ifs.
Yes.
What if you were placed in this horrible situation? What would you do to extricate yourself? How far would you go?
Yeah.
How would your morality be twisted, so to speak, if you had to face these sort of dangers or these sort of problems? What would you do to save somebody else? I mean, all of those things become interesting to me.
I mean, it's all very well say, "Oh no, I would never do that." You don't know until you're in that circumstance, and I think it shines so much more humanity on us as a human race. Is that when somebody is faced with something and the things that they have to do, either in protection or survival, and we don't know what we would do. It's all very well to be righteous, as the spectator,
Absolutely.
but when you're actually in the situation, and I always say that fiction is never very far from fact. You may have written a fictional story, but somewhere along the line, there's somebody living that fact.
Yeah, at least large parts of it. And
Yeah.
you're right, because you don't know. I mean, and I hope you're never in a circumstance where there's a gun to your head, but you don't know how you're going to react if there's a gun to your head.
Yeah.
You don't know how you're going to react. If there's a blazing fire, will you run into the house to save your grandmother? Would you run into the house to save a young girl that you didn't know? Would you run into the house to save a dog?
Right.
You don't really know until that circumstance arises. And so then they say, well, that's what makes heroes and so on. But that is the great part about human nature. We really don't have any idea until we're confronted with that. And so we read and we see how other people react in a fictional sense. And you wonder, as you said earlier, you wonder how you would react to that. That's part of the fun.
I also think it's like, if you ever did come into a situation, I read about this once. And I could do this, I could do that, and it kind of almost becomes a subliminal tutorial on how to get in or out of a situation.
Yes, and as long as there's not lethal danger involved, usually it's helpful.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've lived in some situations and kind of drawn on either past experiences or things. I know I've been in a situation where I've stepped out of being Sarah and stepped into a character to get me through a situation, because I knew that character could handle it better than Sarah could. It's still obviously Sarah doing it, but I kind of, manifested this other person to help me through a situation. And I think,
Sure.
A good book will do that. It stays with you. Those characters stay with you. And I think in many, many ways, it can be even invitational to your own strength and courage.
We can only hope.
We can only hope
that we're there. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You've written other books. Let's go and dive more into those as well. Tell us about those.
Okay, before I do, I just want to say one last pitch about Fool's Errand, because of the topic that we're discussing. A lot of the book, and I don't want to sound, this is not high-end literary fiction. It's not, this is not James Joyce Ulysses or anything, but a lot of it is about self-awareness. The key to the book is not only what this young man discovers about his father, Blackie, along this crazy journey, it's what he learns about himself.
Yeah.
And I think that also is so important in great fiction, what we see others learning about themselves and how that informs thoughts about our own lives.
Yes.
So, and now I'll just segue. as I said, I have a thriller series out there, and it's based on a real CIA agent that I knew. And there are four of them out there. The CIA agent's name is Jordan Sandor. He's sort of an American James Bond. I love James Bond, as
I
you
do
said you
too.
did. And
Yes.
so I
And
just always
Clive
wanted to
Cussler, the
write.
James Bond of the Sea too, right?
Yeah, well, I wanted to write, an American James Bond. So he's a little. It's not so much about tuxedos and martinis, but he's iconoclastic. He's a wiseacre. I mean, he talks back to his superiors and everything. But his one immediate boss knows that he's the best agent that he
Yeah.
has, and so it's really a lot of globetrotting and a lot of fun. And so they are what I would call Graham Greene's entertainments. In other
Mm,
words, I don't expect you to come away with a life-changing experience from those books, but I do expect you to enjoy them, to relate to the Sandor character, to root for him, and so that's a lot of fun. Um, then I came out with the Crimes and Passion, as I mentioned, which is a murder mystery, and that book is a little bit more attuned to who the characters are. And the background on that, to just take a deep dive just for a second, it was a point in my life when a lot of friends were getting divorced. I mean, a lot of friends, almost like all these marriages hit a wall. And it was strange because these weren't 6-year marriages. These were 20-year marriages and
mm,
more. And I thought about, gee, why? I mean, I'd like to write a book exploring that. And then I thought, boy, that'd be an upper, right? I mean, a book about all these divorces. I don't think so. So I thought, well, what could I wrap that around? And I thought, how about a murder mystery?
mm,
And so I created a situation, and again, it happens early in the book, where this woman who is, she's writing a journal about her various sexual exploits. And it turns out that she has been tracking down and seducing the husbands of the women with whom she's in a group therapy, as well as some other women, other
mhm.
husbands, by the way, and creating a journal about it. And she gets murdered in the opening scene. And so you don't know who murdered her. And the whole book is a whodunit, which involves this detective character and the psychologist, who's a woman who ran the group. When it becomes more and more apparent that the people she's writing about in the book, although they're not identified by name, it becomes more obvious to the therapist that these are her other patients. So the level of danger rises because the murderer ultimately has to guess that the psychologist is going to figure out who the murderer is. And so maybe something needs to be done about her while the detective is trying to protect her and solve the murder.
Right.
So there's a lot more character development in Crimes and Passion than in the spy thrillers. The spy thrillers, other than a few main characters like Jordan Sandor, are more about the action type things that you discussed. But in Crimes and Passion, it was a lot of fun because I got to look at different types of damaged marriages, because they come in, there are a lot of different garden varieties of damaged marriages. I mean, marriages
Yes.
fail for many, many, many reasons. It's not just, everyone always thinks, well, it's always infidelity, but that's not true. There are many reasons why marriages fail. And so I enjoyed writing that book. And so I decided to bring back the detective and wrote a sequel about a completely different type of murder mystery. And it's been a lot of fun to do.
Mm. Yeah, I think when you get a kind of a favorite character and you know there's so much more to tell. I mean, I love, when there is a series of, particular detectives that are going, I'm a Clive Cussler fan, especially the
Mhm.
earlier work. And Dirk Pitt, of course, was the James
Oh,
Bond of the
sure.
sea, right? But
Oh,
what I
sure.
always loved is that they always started off with some sort of historical thing that then was kind of revealed as kind of the main plot as the book unraveled. And so many times things that he wrote about actually kind of came true in real life or he
It's
reflected
amazing.
back. Yeah.
Yes, he
And then I
predicted a
learned,
lot, but
yeah,
you loved Dirk Pitt. That's the whole thing.
yes,
He's
yes,
such a likable character.
yes.
And so from a writer's point of view, as we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
if you like a character and you're sorry when the book is over, writing Jordan Sandor, for example,
Yeah,
even though they're just espionage thrillers, I love writing him because I know him now. I know
yes.
exactly who he is. I know what he'll do in every situation. I know where he'll be clever and I know where he'll be not so smart. And, I know where he might make mistakes because he becomes a little bit too aggressive and on and on. And so that makes it fun to return to him in those situations.
You know, a lot of people say they get lost in their character, or their character takes on a life of its own. You're referring to this character, but it is you writing it. So somewhere inside of you, there is, you know, each one of these characters
Oh,
that is
absolutely.
there, that comes out in you. Do you find a different, you know, when the book is being written, do you find that they stay with you? Do you have little conversations with them? You know, does it change the way you look on
No,
life?
that's a fair question. I don't know that I would say I had conversations with them particularly, but I will say that they stay with me, and that harking back to your earlier points about villains, the villains have to be good. I mean,
Mm,
if your villains are two dimensional, if your villains are not interesting, if your villains are obvious, the book's not going to work. I
yeah.
mean, a good hero is important, but a great villain is even more important.
Yes.
Like, you know, like when you think about it, really, and I love James Bond, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
love him. But James Bond is really not a very deep character.
No.
He is, as M said in one of the movies, he's a blunt instrument. I mean, he is, you know, he's a murderer for hire. He's there to protect the country.
With panache.
It's full speed ahead all the time.
Yes.
You know, yes, he's a womanizer. Yes, he
Yeah.
loves to gamble and drink a martini and all that stuff. But there isn't a whole lot of depth there, you know, whereas his villains
Yes.
are really fascinating. I mean, you know, some of them are really wacky. The one played by Christopher Walken
Yeah.
in the Roger Moore James
Yes.
Bond. One of these most recent ones that with like in Skyfall, Javier Bardem was
Yes.
fantastic. I mean, he
Yes.
was great. And then Christopher Waltz in the next one. They're very, very textured villains,
Mhm.
and so that's good. And so I try to make my villains interesting. I try sometimes not to make them so obvious as who the real villain is until you're a little ways into the book and so forth. So yeah, so they do stay with me, and they certainly stay with me enough that I want to be with them again in another book. So I'm comfortable writing those next books. I could understand where somebody like Lee Child wrote, what did he write? 30 Jack Reacher novels,
Hmm.
because he knows exactly who Jack Reacher is.
Right. Just keep putting them in different situations.
Exactly
Um,
right.
you know, and the thing is about a villain, nobody becomes bad overnight. You know, and if you can ever get kind of a little backstory as why did they become this? Why did they become so hateful? Why did they become so villainous? Where did they lose their heart and soul? Because, you know, without an ignited heart, the soul can't speak to us. You know, this, because it is about control, it is about revenge. There's generally always some pain inside of a villain. And if ever you can see that pain, there is that compassion for, they may not like what they've become, but you have more compassion for the villain themselves.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, just to stay with the James Bond theme, I think it was Skyfall was the one with
Mhm.
Javier Bardem, excuse me, and he had been betrayed by M. He had been an
Yes.
agent or something and been betrayed by M. In the next one, Christopher Waltz, and for some reason, forgive me, I'm drawing a blank on the name of that one, but in any event, he
Don't talk
felt he
about
had been
this.
betrayed by his own father, who preferred James Bond. If
Yes.
you remember, it turned out like the reveal at the end is that this guy's father, this one's father, had helped to raise this orphan James Bond and seemed to have preferred him, and that was where all this resentment came from. Okay, is it a little corny?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it the most creative idea of all time? No. But as you say, it still gives us
Yes.
that insight
Yeah.
where it makes it believable, and we understand that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know, that's how it works.
Yeah.
That's just how it works with villains. They've
And
got to be
anybody,
interesting.
it shows that anyone can become a villain. You know, in the, you know, the right circumstances, or, you know, the, depending on the particular personality type as well. But there are so many people walking around with inner pain today that they lash out to hurt other people, to relieve their own pain.
Yeah, well, now you're touching on a real sore spot, because this is so sad what's going on in the world right
Mm,
now. There's so much division, there's so much hate, and it just, I mean, I don't know that it gets us any place. I personally don't think it does,
no.
but it's really so sad. And you read these things. I mean, just as an example, and I hate to, I don't want to bring the audience down, but this shooting in this trailer in, where was it, in Colorado the other day?
Yes.
Guy walks into a party where his ex-girlfriend or something is, and kills 6 adults and then himself. I mean, was there not a better way to handle whatever was going on there? I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me that people do these things, or random shootings. I mean, are even
Yeah.
more inexplicable.
Yeah.
I mean, we've really got to get a handle on things. And they
Yeah.
talk about gun control as a solution. I don't know the exact statistic, but there's something like 5 million illegal guns in the United States.
Yeah.
So even if every law-abiding citizen were to give up their gun and say, "You're right, we need gun control," you've got 5 million guns or more out there that the criminals have.
Right.
So what have you solved?
Yeah.
So,
No, the
so
guns,
to me,
as far as I'm concerned, they've got to be eliminated because
yeah,
nobody
well,
needs an AK-7.
that's the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we really need to get into the stop dealing with the symptom and deal with the real disease, which is there's a lot of violence in the society. There are these gangs in the inner cities. There's not enough education of the poor. Those sorts of things are where the solutions are. And for me in my country, my sadness is that I just don't see a what's the word I'm looking for, the group of leaders
No.
that we really need to take us to the next level. And I don't know, it's unfortunate, but I'm troubled by that.
Yeah. No, I mean, hopefully the next leader will be a younger and somebody who understands that, yes, there's some root cause that need to be completely weeded out. We had 2 shootings over this weekend, 2 gangs, one at the airport and another one, just a guy walking down the street, just eliminated. They're 17, they're 19. It's gang warfare. And
Yeah.
we've had
Oh,
so
yeah.
many shootings this year and in public places, totally brazen. And I do think that a lot of the TV and the games glorify that because they never see the consequences or the ricochet from it.
Right, because it's not real.
Right. And, as one person said, I live on the street and I'm afraid to walk down it. Nobody, those people that are so happy with the gun trigger, like, the movie, as you say, John Wick, it is like, well, what about the people that nearly got shot or got shot with a ricochet bullet or, that have
those
that
are real
trauma?
lives.
They're real
Those are
lives
real
that
lives.
you're in it.
Look,
You've just taken that person out, but what about the mess you've left behind?
I'm in Connecticut, as we mentioned before, I was talking to you about before we went on the air. And so, I'm right near New York City. The other day, I think it's 2 days ago, a young guy with a gun walked into the crowded Times Square, attempted to shoot his own brother. Now get to this. He was attempting to shoot his own brother, which he could have waited till he went home or something. But he attempted to shoot his own brother and wound up shooting a 7-year-old or 8-year-old girl. I'm not exactly sure what the age was. And this policewoman scooped this girl up in her arms and took off at a dead run to get her to a hospital because she didn't even want to wait for the ambulance.
Right.
That's how crazy the world is right now.
Yes.
It's like in Times Square. So, I mean,
and the thing is, guns don't kill people if they're not in the wrong hands. It's the police and the military should have guns. I understand if you're way out in the rural, you need protection, but it's become too glorified. And this is the thing, I think, when it comes to the right, we've talked about the movies and the books where it's just about take out as many bodies as you can.
Yeah.
As opposed to a book or a movie that can take you into the unravel, the story, the content behind it, and that there is a solution, a dialogue or an action that could be taken that isn't like the machete coming out,
Right.
And
no,
if
you're
this
right.
is all they're seeing, this is, you talked about the attention span, of somebody, I've had people say to me, oh, your shows need to be shorter. And I said, they're not designed for those people with that attention span. They're designed for the curious people that really want to know some more in-depth
Oh
and
my
unravel,
gosh, Sarah, you raise another great point, which is we live in a headline world. People don't read
Twitter
behind
world,
the headlines.
Yeah, I know.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And so how can you have any depth? How can you have any unraveling? Everything is instant gratification. And that's why so many people are detached and unhappy, because the instant gratification is like a sugar high. Once it's gone, they're just looking for another instant gratification to subsidize it. It's the new drug.
They should read Fool's Errand because it's a zero body count. It's a zero body count, and it's about people actually coming together in its way. And that's another reason, as I said to you at the very outset, that's another reason that I went in the direction of writing that sort of book during the pandemic.
Yes.
Because I think we need more of that.
Yeah.
And, we need to have life affirmed. We don't need to have life diminish.
No.
And it's really something that we all have to address together. We really have to come together and address it. We're all on the same planet. We're all breathing the same air. The things that are going on are reprehensible, but there are solutions. But we have to have the courage to enact the solutions, to take the steps necessary. Empty promises, more of the same is not going to get it done. It's just not.
And the thing about reading a book like you've got there, like, as you said, Zero Body Count, it is about him unraveling a story. It is about not only the discovery of his father, but as himself along the way. If we are more willing in our own lives to do our own self-discovery, to have something inspire us and invite us to take our own journey and to look at resolving a situation instead of just getting up in arms or anger about it. Every single thing has a solution if you're willing to feed it. And the more we're actually willing to go down the road of kind of reading about, how your character solved that solution, it's like, oh, okay, that didn't seem too difficult. I could apply that in my own life. It isn't just read the book, put it down. There's always points there that can come back to you.
That's right. Bless you. Yes. See you sneeze, it must be true, as they say. Yeah. So it's true. And so there are things we need to address. And so we need to basically be good to each other. We need to be aware of who we are ourselves. That's the beginning. As you say, self-awareness is the beginning of everything. Yeah. If you're not true to yourself, I hate to say things like to thine own self be true, but it's absolutely where it's at. I mean, that's where we have to begin. And then we can build relationships and have authentic relationships with people. And the society grows from that. Otherwise, it's going to get worse.
When we read a book, from chapter to chapter, we grow with the characters. We're now on the next adventure. Where are they going to go? We don't want to go to the end of the book and see where they got, because it means absolutely nothing if you're not willing to understand the journey along the way.
That's it. It's the journey.
And our lives is, in our own book of life, we're going to have many chapters. So, be willing to explore them, be willing to experience and learn from them, because it just makes your next chapter even more interesting.
Yep. Woody Allen had a very funny bit where he was with, so I forget if it was a movie or if it was a stand-up thing, but anyway, he would go into a bookstore, buy a murder mystery, open the last page and read it. And his friend said, why would you ever buy a murder mystery and read the last page first? And of course, Woody Allen was famously depressive, and he said, in case I die before I finish the book, I want to know how it ended. and so it was really, he was making fun of the very thing that you're espousing, which is you have to take the journey, otherwise it doesn't matter. It's like you say about instant gratification. People don't want to work, they want to win the lottery. People don't want to go to their job, they want to get unemployment benefits. People don't want to lift that barge and tote that bale. They want welfare. So this is the whole point. Life is about understanding yourself. It's about working hard. It's about being true to the people you love. That's where joy comes from.
Living.
How people don't get that all these thousands of years later is really mystifying. It's mystifying.
And we have more access to books, to YouTubes, to podcasts, to everything. We have all of this at our fingertips that can help explain, that can help guide us, that can help nurture us. Yet we still stand there, going, I don't know what to do. Participate in your own life, be investigative, be wondrous, be inquisitive. Your own self-discovery is yours to discover, not somebody else's, yours.
That's right.
How your life is going to end up, what that next chapter is going to be, is your participation in your own life.
Right. I don't want to know the answer. It's like they say,
I know I'm going to die. That's the end of the book, right?
That's right. But they say, would you like to know the date on which you're going to die? No, of course not. You want to live the journey. Look, how many times do we see, and I'm sorry to say this, I'm not picking on anybody, but how many times do we see the children of the rich and or famous have all kinds of problems?
Yes.
With drugs, with orienting themselves. Why? Because they're not motivated. They're not motivated to do anything. Everything is handed to them. Yeah. So they don't get the joy of building something. I admire wealthy families who insist that their kids work, that they don't give them everything. I remember reading, there was a story way back when, God, I'm going back in the memory bank now, but I think I read when I was a kid that Bobby Kennedy, obviously, he was a Kennedy. Mm-hmm. He gave his kids $1 a week in allowance. And I remember saying to my mother, "Cheapers, that's what you give me. What a cheapskate he
Mm,
is, you know." And she just looked at me. She said, "No, no, no. He is a smart man.
yeah,
He's a smart man because he made them earn the rest of it. If they wanted to
right.
make more money, they had to do chores or they had to go
Yeah.
run errands or they had to do something. And that's how you build character,
Yes.
not by handouts."
No. No, and as you said, a lot of the people that have been born to that riches, they've they're so in a bubble they have no reality. You know, I'm always using the metaphor that if you're going to go and do business somewhere, when you walk into that building, if it's dirty, if it's not being cleaned up, the bathrooms are horrible, the lifts are greasy. By the time you've got to that office of that big CEO of that company, your entire image is completely marred. How do I want to do business with somebody when the place is so unpresentable?
Good point.
So the janitors are your first front. They're the people that work the hardest, that they're unseen, that are paid the less, but they've set the stage in which for the CEO to be able to present himself. So, you know, we forget and we put down the hard workers, and we should.
Absolutely. Oh,
But
absolutely.
and I think COVID has done a great deal of that to show us who the real heroes are. It's not the big CEOs or the big people with the big money. For a lot of those people who have been doing Zoom interviews, we've seen more honesty and more down to earth and more authenticity from them than we ever see if they're interviewed on TV or anywhere else. I think it's been a kind of a level playing field, and we truly know who the heroes are. And those CEOs that are put themselves up on those pedestals and those ivory towers, the way they've conducted themselves has been very revealing, and it's really brought them down a notch quite
It sure
considerably.
has. It sure has. It's frontline health workers. It's
Mm,
law enforcement. It's, hospital people. It's,
shopkeepers,
everyone.
truck
But
drivers,
you
yeah,
are right. Everyone, getting back to the janitor example, everyone, I don't know, looks down on a janitor.
yeah,
Everyone has a role in society. Everyone has a
everybody.
job to do.
Be proud
The
of it.
key is to be proud of the
Yes,
job you do. Do the
yes,
best you can do all the time. That's the secret to success. That's the secret to happiness in life. I don't care
yes,
what it is that you do.
right. We've all got a meaningful purpose. That self-discovery is, what is my instrument? How do I play it? Which orchestra do I bring it to?
That's right.
Right?
I'm with you.
So yours is writing. It's to keep us intrigued. It's to keep us thinking. It's not,
Entertained.
yeah, to
Entertained.
entertain, but it's, again, as I said, when a book stays with you, or when you want the sequel, or you recommend it to someone else, that's when you know you've got a successful book. It's not like, did I read that? I can't remember because the story didn't stay with me. And it's like, oh,
Right.
I read that years
Oh
ago
gosh.
and I
Right.
loved that character. I wonder if there was a sequel from that. And that's what you want. You want the engagement. It is
That's
an
right.
invitation for you to engage in your own life. We want something that's nitty gritty and got some content to it that we can put our teeth into. We don't want
Yep.
just blind blah, 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 because it doesn't engage us.
Nope. You're right.
So keep writing.
Absolutely. Yes. I'll keep at it.
Do you have another one in the works now?
I do actually. The sequel to Crimes and Passion is another murder mystery, which I'm happy about, and we're copy editing that as we speak. And I've got another espionage novel in the works. So yeah, I'm busy.
Good, good. It isn't just to pass the time, it is to ignite our imagination. It's to show us maybe some possibilities within ourselves. It's something that you want to refer to, but we also to come away, feeling good, feeling either uplifted or feeling entertained or feeling that it was worthwhile spending that time.
Well said. Very well said. I certainly feel that way.
How do people get all of your books? Where did they find them?
Um, uh, First of all, support your local bookstores because they've really taken a hit during the pandemic.
Yes, yes.
So I don't know where people are going to be watching this, but if you've got a local bookstore anywhere
Mostly
in the
America.
area, yeah, everywhere, if you can, even if they don't have it on the shelf, just order it. It's Fool's Errand, Jeffrey Stevens with a PH, by the way. And you could look on my website, jeffreystevens.com. Again, Stevens is with a PH, not a V. And obviously, the 800-pound gorilla is Amazon. If all else fails, it's available on hardcover. It's on sale right now for the upcoming Father's Day. And it's also on Kindle. And it'll soon be available on audiobooks. And all of my books are available there.
Excellent. And this is a good time, and people aren't back to work full force yet. There's still plenty of time at home. Even though, if you've had a hard day of work, sometimes you just need to decompress and kind of putting your feet up, a good glass of wine, and a good book, and I'm one of these people, I can't just read a chapter at a time. I get lost in the book. I'm pretty well going to read it until I finish it or take a couple of days to do it because I'm on that journey. This is the
Good for
way I
you.
love
That's
to
the
read
best
them.
way to read. The best way to read.
You're there with it, My kids used to laugh at me with the Harry Potter books because I was the only one completely immersed into them. But I think people need to do more reading. It is.
I certainly agree, but they really should. They really
Yeah.
should get away
Well,
from the
it's your
TV.
interpretation, isn't it? It's your interpretation
Oh
of
yes,
it. And a book club, the reason for a book club is that you've received this from the character. Somebody else has seen something else, and somebody else has seen something else, and you get that conversation, and you're looking at things in a different way, and I wish people would have more book clubs and more podcast books to have the discussion as well. So don't just put the book down and forget about it. Refer it, and speak about it. That's what social media is about, folks. I've just read this great book. Come and read it, come and listen to it, because don't just share mindless conspiracy theories. Be engaged and share something fun. So
right, you are.
thanks so much for sharing. This has been
Thank
great.
you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
I'm going to have to get your books. I love a good thriller. I love a good adventure.
Okay, well, you'll love them. Crimes and Passion. Check that out. I think that'll be up your alley.
Yeah, most certainly, especially having
and Fool's Errand, everybody. Fool's Errand for Father's Day, the perfect gift.
Yes, exactly. And what's good is give Dad the book, tell him to go and put his feet up outside, a beer in his hand, and just forget about anything else. Right?
There you go.
Right. So, folks, please read. Please read his books. Remember, being engaged in a book, you don't just put it down and forget it. If the characters are good, if you've really been immersed in it, you take it with you, and you never know when that character is going to come up in your own life. So please support Jeffrey Stevens with his books. A good thriller is really good for your heart and soul. So until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. You will hear many shows here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. We have new shows for you out every week. Just find them on our podcast or What's New. If you feel that you have something to share that makes a difference in the lives of others, or you too feel that you could be a host, please contact me at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com, and we will be glad to speak with you. Have a wonderful day.